Hello. I wanted to talk about using Wise authoring query language, also known as WAQL, to search your Wise project for pretty common issues that can easily make it into the game, cause audio bugs, and just be not ideal from the player experience. Here I've set up a fake Wise project that has some issues, and we're going to use queries to find those issues. Going over to the Queries tab, I have some that I've already set up, but real quick, I'm going to make a new one so I could show you if you've never used queries before. Um, the kind of default way to use them is actually using this browser. And this has all these objects and these properties of objects that you can search for and use these operators with. Personally, I have a hard time creating the queries that I want with this browser, and so I really like using WAQL instead. And to do so, you're going to click this dropdown, select WAQL query. That opens up this text box where you can type in your search in the WAQL language, and then that's going to find some issues in your project. So starting with a query I've written, I want to search the project for objects where attenuation has been enabled, but 3D positioning has been disabled, which is a pretty common issue. Let me show you, before explaining the query, what the object actually looks like. So this is when you have a container that has overridden the positioning tab and they set a new attenuation, but they forgot to set 3D spatialization. This is actually really common where the moment you hit override parent, where it previously was set to position and orientation, it gets set to none. And it's really easy to not realize this and to check it in. And then all of a sudden you have a sound that is getting distance attenuation applied, but it's not actually panning. And that's why you want it to be position and orientation. Because this has been set up incorrectly, it's hitting this query that I made. So let's look at the query. I actually really like to, when I'm working on queries, to use the search bar up here. So I'm going to paste my query here. You click on list view, and this is an easy way to view the whole query. The great thing about using list view also is that it will live update the results as you're typing it out. So this is a really great tool when writing a new query. It will also immediately highlight in red if there's an issue. So here I'm missing a space where there needs to be a space, so it's telling me the whole query is invalid. And now it's fixed. So what this query is doing is it's searching the actor mixer hierarchy. I'm also defining a specific folder, which is the project folder. To explain that really quick, I do this so that we can have an actual working project hierarchy, but we also have a user hierarchy so that everyone working on the project can have a safe working area that's not going to hit these queries. So we're searching the project, and we are also going to be selecting descendants where 3D spatialization has been set to none, but attenuation has been enabled, and attenuation is not equal none. I'm also searching if override positioning is true. So you can see that that's going to hit all of these conditions that result in this bad sound. And you can also see that if I fix this, it's not going to hit the query anymore. So the query did its job. I found the issue, I fixed the issue, and that was easy, wasn't it? Another great issue to search for is an event that is missing a reference. I'm going to show that really quick. Run the query. I'm going to find this issue, and this is a case of having an event that was referencing content and that content was deleted. Sometimes the content was accidentally deleted, or someone removed it and didn't realize that an event was referencing it. Can cause an issue where an event is posted from the game. It's supposed to be playing content, but no content is playing. It will also throw an error in the Wise profiler. So to take a look at this query, there's a little bit of gotchas on this one, and that's because we're going to search events and we're going to search where the target is set to none. But then we also have to check that there aren't a bunch of these different action types. And these action types are actually any case where an event is sending an action to all. I actually have an example here. This event is doing reset low pass filter all. This is a case where it's actually valid for there to be no target. So this is one of the action types that I'm checking against, or rather removing from the check. And so that in this case, this query is not going to have a false positive on an event that is actually valid. So once I've made sure that it's not any of those action types, we're just going to select the parent, and there it goes. It finds the event. Another great query to search for is loop containers with looping children. Granted, this is kind of specific to the way that I've learned to author loops in Wwise, and so it might not be valid for you, but I want to show that really quick. So in this case, I have a random looping container that has loop variations. So in that case, what I want is for this random container to be looping and for it to randomly be selecting these different variations that are seamlessly playing back. An issue that can happen is if someone set the random container to loop, but then they also mistakenly set each of these sound objects to loop. So what is actually going to happen here is this is intended to play these different variations randomly, but because each of them have been set to loop, what's going to happen is this random container is going to randomly choose a variation, and then it's just going to infinitely loop that one variation, which is not desired. So taking a look at the query, checking the actor mixer hierarchy for random containers where it has been set to continuous, loop is true, and then it's going to select any children where looping has been enabled. And then it's going to go back and select the parent container. That way we don't have a huge list of a bunch of these. This query is another one that, again, is a little project specific depending on the settings that you like, but this is checking for any loops that are not set to sample accurate. And to explain that, you can see here is a loop that has been set to crossfade. This can be negative depending again on your project, because in that brief period where the loop is crossfading between the variations, it's going to occupy two voices instead of one, which is going to affect your overall voice limits. And so to ensure that this loop is only taking up one voice, I want it to be set to sample accurate. So taking a look at the query, I'm going to be searching for random containers that are set to continuous, and they are either set to crossfade power or crossfade amp. And that's going to pull this up. If I set it to sample accurate, it is no longer going to be hitting this query. The next query I wanted to cover, I actually haven't written yet, so you can see what it looks like to write these queries. I've decided that I want to search for an issue that can occur when someone has set the playback limit on a sound, but then they checked the ignore parent checkbox, and I can show what that looks like. In this case, I wanted to limit the sound instances to 20, and I hit ignore parent. I find that a lot of people click this because they think that this will not apply to this container unless ignore parent is set. And this is actually not true. Ignore parent when set will cause this container to not apply any of the voice limits that have been set higher up. So if, for example, this SFX actor mixer has been set to, let's say, 10, when this one says ignore parent, it's going to ignore that limit of 10 and it's going to play 20 anyway. So most of the time that is not desired, which is why I have a query for it. So to write this query, I know I want to search the actor mixer hierarchy. Going to pop this into list view. I know I need to select descendants within this hierarchy. And from here, I want to find a certain property setting, and I need to find what that property setting is called. And to do so, I really like to pull up the documentation that covers all of the object types, all of the properties and their names and their possible values. So I'm looking for ignore parent playback limit. So I'm just going to type here, and I actually am able to find it really fast, which is great. So that's where I can find the name of this property that I want to search for, ignore parent max sound instance. So going back to the project, I'm going to search for this property, and if it is true. And I did a syntax error because I needed to type where. There we go. And here we see we have the hit on that container. If I uncheck that, it goes away. Another query that's good to search for is actually an example where the normal query browser is actually the easiest way to create this query. And that's for sounds routed to the master audio bus. I like to check for this because if something is routed to the master audio bus, it's going to be bypassing everything I'm setting in the bus hierarchy, whether it's voice limits, sidechaining, ducking, that kind of thing. It can also bypass any states that you're setting for game volume settings, etc. So generally not good if a sound is routed to the master audio bus. In this case, all I need to do is use this query browser, go into routing, output bus is master audio bus. Run the query, and then it found a hit. And here's a sound where the output bus has been overridden to master audio bus. So again, it's a great query where it's actually quite easy to create it in the browser, but it's catching a pretty core issue that if it makes it into the game would be pretty bad. This next query is great if you use Wwise rooms and portals because it will catch any issues where a sound should be propagating, but it is not. And we do use a couple of assumptions with this query, so let me just talk it through. I'm gonna pull up in list view. Going to be searching the actor mixer hierarchy where 3D spatialization is enabled. And then where diffraction and transmission is set to false. I do want to make sure that the sound is included, which is actually a good check to have in a lot of your queries. And then I want to check if override positioning is true. I also want to make sure that attenuation is not set to none. And here's something that depends on your naming conventions. In a lot of projects I've worked on, we have separate sounds for 1P and 3P, and they do have that name included in the container. And in this case, I'm making sure that the sound does not include 1P, so that if there is a 1P sound where attenuation has been enabled, or position and orientation for whatever reason, it's not going to negatively say, hey, the sound needs to propagate, because it's actually only heard by 1P, so we don't want it to propagate. So looking at this result, here's a sound where 3D spatialization is set to position and orientation. There's an attenuation that has been set, but diffraction and transmission has been unchecked. I actually see this happen a lot again when someone overrides the parent and the parent was set to diffraction and transmission. But say you want to change the attenuation, so you override, change the attenuation, you remember to set position and orientation, but you forget to recheck diffraction and transmission. So this will catch that issue where the sound should be propagating because it's a 3D sound, it's attenuating, it's panning, but this was mistakenly left unchecked. And then this last query that I wanted to cover is searching for 2D sounds in a 3P hierarchy. This is another one where it's really great if you have naming conventions set up in your project. It allows you to make some assumptions that is searching for the name of your containers and the name of your hierarchies. And that way it can catch issues where a sound is in a certain hierarchy, it has a certain name, but the settings are wrong. So in this case, this is where, again, we have a 1P hierarchy that is set up from a 3P hierarchy. And there's a sound that is in a 3P hierarchy, but it has all of its attenuation mistakenly disabled. So I'm going to be searching the actor mixer hierarchy. I'm going to be checking to see if the name includes 3P. And then I'm going to be checking to make sure it does not include 1P. And then I'm going to select the descendants where 3D spatialization has been set to none or attenuation has been set to none. So running that query. So here we have a hierarchy that I've set up called 3P, and this is for sounds that are supposed to be heard only by the third person. And I accidentally overrode it to set 3D spatialization to none and attenuation to none. This is actually a pretty common issue that is really easy to make it into the game, and it's going to cause a sound that a third person player character is making to suddenly be completely 2D, no panning, no attenuation, and be heard, across the map. So it's really great to lean into naming conventions that you have set up and to check for issues that can occur, making a little bit of assumptions, but they're correct assumptions that this is definitely going to result in a non-ideal bug. So that's just some of the queries that you can set up in your project. I really hope that it kind of gives you some ideas of things that you can search for. With these queries, once you set them up, you can be running them all the time to check for these issues. And that's just like really great for project maintenance to be able to find these things just so thoroughly and so quickly. It's also possible to set up these queries to be run with a script. And that's really powerful because then you don't have to manually run these queries anymore. The script can be run depending on your processes that are in place at your studio. You could have it run nightly, for example, or you could have it run every time someone checks content in. So the closer you can get these queries to be run to the problem getting checked in, the better. And I know that I went through a lot of the actual syntax really fast because this video would be extremely long if I did do so. But I'll put some links in the video description to show how I figure out these property names and the syntax, and that's with the WAQL documentation that's online. The two that I always reference is the actually backing out a little bit, is the Wise Object References page. And so you can start with what is the property that I'm looking for and where does it exist. A lot of the ones that I was checking is going to be under the actor mixer type. But then there's also like the actions, would be event actions. There's also some searches that I did that had to do with random sequence containers. And that's where you find the name of the properties and then the values. The other page that I like to have bookmarked is the WAQL reference page. And this will explain all of the object types that you can use, the expressions, there's Boolean operations, that kind of thing. There really is a lot to learn. Like, I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. But it's just so great to be able to create these queries that can catch these issues so quickly and so easily. So that's all I had. Thank you.